We've covered a lot of evidence-based tips to help with parenting decisions and child development in general. And a lot of developmental science seems to be about how to make kids smarter, stronger, and better at the things our society tends to measure. Things like reading, math, creativity, and the like. Today, as we wrap up the course, I want to urge you, to at least some extent, to take a step back from this. It's a good thing to encourage and enrich your child's development, but there could be something lost if we push beyond encouraging development and into hurrying development. In this lecture, I want you to consider the potentially great values of an unhurried childhood. It can be a really good thing to let a child progress at his own pace, mastering things when he's ready to take on a particular challenge. It's also good to let a child have time to do something that has enriched and promoted child development for as long as there have been children: playing. As a parent, one of my primary goals has always been to provide the best possible start for my children. I want them to succeed in life. I want them to get the best grades, be on the best sports teams, get into great colleges, and be fabulously happy, healthy, and wealthy. In some respects, I think all parents want this same thing. And these sentiments aren't limited to a child's parents. Grandparents feel the same way. They can and often do play an important role in a child's upbringing, as do other family members and friends. Child caregivers in general play an important role. Children are pretty equal opportunity when it comes to learning from and loving the people around them. So, as I keep saying parent, please know that I'm thinking of parents as this much larger group of important people. For all of these people, one motivation for learning from a course like this one is the one I raised just a few moments ago: giving kids' development a boost. The knowledge that comes from learning about studies of child development and parenting can arm you with information that may be useful for helping your kids to solve problems, to learn faster and better, to achieve all of those highfalutin aims that most parents have. We've already covered a lot of tips for promoting better child development, and our list is very, very long. It's long enough that it starts to sound like a full-time job. Okay, here we go. If you want to enhance your child's development, you should talk to your child a lot from the time she's an infant. You should give her action opportunities, including tummy time within the first few months of life. You should teach your child sign language, at least a few words of it. While you're at it, you should find a way to enable your child to learn more than one spoken language as well, ideally fluently. This bilingual development, remember, will enhance many aspects of her cognitive function. You should expose your child to vegetables and a generally varied and healthy diet. You should work to ensure that the child eats at least a little of many things, but remember, don't force him to eat everything that's on his plate. To promote motor development and reasoning about others' intentions, you should make your 2-month-old Velcro sticky mittens and attach the other side of the Velcro to some toys. Then play with her using these toys and mittens so she can learn to hold up and visually explore objects, even before she can independently grasp them. She'll get to do this a full 2 months before the rest of the kids on the block. You should also buy a nice set of wooden blocks and give your child time to play imaginatively with them. To promote better IQ, you should sign your child up for music lessons, maybe piano or violin. You should present your baby with a visually stimulating environment, but you should steadfastly avoid letting her see any television prior to age 2. After age 2, you should present your child with a healthy media diet, one that includes moderate amounts of educational programming. But remember, only those programs that are supported by careful assessments of their effectiveness. Watch shows like Caillou, Sesame Street, and Cyber Chase with your child. Talk with her about those shows. Avoid SpongeBob, especially for younger children. You should allow your older children to play video games. Non-violent games, but games that are sufficiently intense, story-like, and engaging so as to enhance visual and cognitive function. Ideally, some of those games should promote and model pro-social behaviors as well. You should model pro-social behaviors yourself. Allow your child to see you engaged in sharing and helping. But also remember that you should avoid explicitly reinforcing your child for engaging in those pro-social behaviors. As the child gets older, you should buy or construct Montessori educational materials and perhaps enroll her in one of these educational programs. You should work on developing your child's number sense using things like the 100 board and counting chains. Once these are mastered, you should purchase other materials that enable a child to explore physically instantiated division and other mathematical operations. By the age of 10, you should make extra sure that your child understands fractions and ratios. This will give him a leg up on mastering the next several years of scholastic mathematics. You should reinforce your child for effort as opposed to just reinforcing him for accomplishment. When your child fails at something, be sure to model and encourage a good attributional style. Failure is okay as long as you attribute it to unstable or external factors, so as not to diminish enthusiasm for continuing to put forth effort to succeed in the future. You should enroll your child in yoga or traditional taekwondo classes in order to enhance self-awareness, self-control, and executive function. Get your child involved in team sports and other regular physical exercise. If there's a problem with fitness, remember to reinforce reductions in sedentary behavior rather than reinforcing increases in active exercise so as to promote lasting changes. Provide your child with frequent opportunities to interact with peers. As the child progresses to sociodramatic play, you should allow and even encourage more of this so as to maximize the development of executive function abilities. You should encourage, perhaps require, your child to participate in at least some volunteer community service activities. You should, of course, read to your child from picture books from the time the child is very young. As the child becomes receptive to it, you should train him to trace and then write simple letters. You should associate appropriate sounds with them. You should practice phonics, and as soon as basic reading is mastered, begin to include whole word reading as well. You should teach your child social and emotional skills, directly and explicitly, and provide him with opportunities to practice those skills by working with and playing with groups of other children. You should get your children vaccinated. You should do all of this while being authoritative in your parenting style, also avoiding authoritarian or permissive parenting styles. I'm going to stop there, but this list could go on and on. I haven't even listed all of the tips for promoting development in just this one course. There are many others. Many experimental studies have found that certain types of activities are associated with enhancing or at least accelerating child development. For instance, I haven't had time to discuss recent work suggesting that adopting a dog or cat can be good for physical and mental development. Something about the presence of a non-human mammal in the house reduces the likelihood of asthma in children. Caring for a pet is also associated with improved motor, social, and mental development. Even after statistically controlling for many other factors, children with pets tend to have a more developed self-concept and better self-esteem. So all of that other stuff I just listed, and get a pet too. I also haven't talked at all about differences between firstborn siblings and younger kids. There's some established, very large-scale studies showing greater general achievement for oldest siblings. Some data suggest that this difference is due to a tendency for parents to invest less in terms of stimulation and enrichment for those younger children. If nothing else, after the second or third child is born, the pool of available parent time has to be shared among 2 or 3 children. So all of the other stuff, get a dog, and be extra vigilant and supportive with younger children to combat this tendency. Whew. Should a parent really be doing all of this? It seems like a lot. It is a lot. There's a rich literature on things that parents can do to enhance child development. Much of that research is about ways to deal with problems as they arise. But in many cases, the aim seems to be accelerating development. This type of research has been, in many respects, a staple of developmental science. Some of the most basic questions that have formed the foundation of developmental research have had to do with figuring out nature versus nurture issues. What's built in based on our genetic encoding, and what's acquired through our experience with the environment. If a researcher finds that she can change the course of development by altering the child's experiences, then you can know that the development is, at least in part, due to environmental influences and thus to nurture. A few decades ago, however, developmental scientists, sort of as a field, shifted their thinking about these issues. They realized that essentially every aspect of development is due to both nature and nurture. Indeed, the truly interesting questions aren't at all about whether something results from nature or nurture. The informative results are all about how those two different types of factors work together. That is, the nature versus nurture question never really yields an answer. It always seems to lead to another set of questions. And once you've answered those new questions, the original nature versus nurture issue turns out usually to just not be very important. Even as this change has taken place at the level of fundamental science in terms of the field as a whole, studies aimed at accelerating developmental processes have persisted. In large part, this is due to researchers' hopes and goals, really, of having a positive impact on children's education and development. Brilliant children tend to be precocious in their development. They seem to think and act older than their chronological age might indicate. Indeed, the original definition of IQ, the intelligence quotient, was based on a calculation of the mental age divided by the chronological age. According to this perspective, if you can make children develop faster, then you're making them more intelligent. I've already suggested some reasons that there's a lot more to intelligence than this. But this represents, I think, an underlying value that many parents have. We want our kids to develop better, and that often means we want them to develop faster. Today, I'll argue, however, that these two things are not necessarily the same. Faster is not always better. Sometimes faster can be worse. There's a well-known set of products marketed under the name Your Baby Can Read. You may have seen it on television. If you search YouTube or other video libraries with the terms Your Baby Can Read, you'll see some remarkable but largely deceptive claims that children as young as 9 or 10 months of age can learn to read. That within a year or so, they could be reading novels. For a few $100s, you can buy a deluxe set of flashcards, videos, pop-up books, and instruction manuals that go with it. Hundreds of millions of dollars in sales later, the company that produced these materials, the Your Baby Can company, was eventually sued by the Federal Trade Commission for misleading advertising claims. In particular, there was a claim that children trained with the system could start to read novels, books like Charlotte's Web and Harry Potter, by the time they were 3 years of age. There are individual parents who continue to claim that their children are able to do this, and perhaps they are. But there's just no clear evidence that the system works in typical controlled situations. In general, the way this system works is it follows an idea that you work with children to help them learn to associate words on flashcards with the pronounced sounds of those words. Initially, a picture is also included on the flashcards, but eventually, the child is supposed to learn to pronounce the words just based on the letters. The claim is that the child can learn very early to start to read these words. Now, before we talk more about babies reading, let's talk about babies learning simple associations between stimuli and actions. Psychologists refer to this as operant conditioning. Basic operant conditioning is something that children can do, probably from the time they're born. Some evidence suggests even before then. There's a classic series of studies that were performed by Carolyn Rovi-Collier and her colleagues, in which a child would be placed in a crib under an attractive mobile. One end of a ribbon would be tied to the child's ankle. The other end would be tied to the mobile, such that when the child would kick, the mobile would shake. Even 3-month-olds seemed to enjoy this and to quickly learn the connection between their kicking and the moving of the mobile. Imagine that you place 2 children in 2 adjoining cribs with the mobile hanging right in the middle so that both babies can see it. You tie separate ribbons to each child's ankle. For one of the children, you connect their ribbon to the mobile. For the other child, you attach the ribbon to a small post that's not connected to the mobile. Now, if you leave these 2 babies here for a few minutes, both children will see exactly the same pattern of mobile movement. Whenever the mobile moves, they both see it. They receive exactly the same visual input and sensory input in general. But only one of these 3-month-olds is actually in control of the mobile. Within a few minutes, it's clear that the controlling infant knows that. That child will kick much, much more than the baby who's not in control of the movement. Indeed, the controlling child will increase kicking with the particular leg that's in control of the mobile. This as opposed to just generally getting excited and moving around more in general. If you bring that controlling child back a few days later and just place her in the same crib, under the same mobile, she'll begin kicking furiously. She'll do this even if the leg is no longer attached to the mobile. The child thus seems to learn the connection between her specific actions and specific outcomes in the environment, and she seems able to remember them for an extended period of time. Additional research has shown that the child can differentiate aspects of the mobile in this task. So if the child's leg is connected when one type of mobile is displayed, say a red one with a particular pattern on it, but not connected when a different mobile is displayed, one that's maybe a different color with a different pattern on it, the child will learn that. The increase in kicking, both in that initial session and then in the one that's delayed when the long-term memory is tested, in both of these sessions, the kicking will be much greater for the type of mobile where the kicking action has been effective in the past. Now, no one would confuse this type of learning that's taking place with the crib and the mobile with reading. Not even close. It's just straight old operant conditioning. It's the same thing a rat does when it learns to hit a lever to get a food reward. But this same operant conditioning can give you everything you need to succeed with those flashcards that supposedly promote reading. When the child sees a particular mobile, kicking produces a reward. In that case, seeing a moving object is the reward. Kids like that. When the child sees a card with a cat shape or some blob shaped like a C, A, or T, the child learns that making k sounds, maybe along with ah or t, that making these sounds is likely to produce a reward. In this case, the reward is something else that babies like, the delighted, happy noises and smiles of the parent holding those flashcards. Young infants are very smart. They can do operant conditioning. They can do it remarkably well, but they can't read. Reading, as we've discussed, involves much, much more than just associating shapes and sounds. In the face of a wave of litigation brought by groups of parents, grandparents, and the Federal Trade Commission, the Your Baby Can company closed its doors and went out of business. But others will almost certainly take its place. Indeed, there are already many copycat products out there. Many related products are also on the market. For instance, you can buy DVDs that claim to enhance speech production in preverbal infants. You can buy flashcards designed to teach infants and toddlers math facts, things like multiplication and division problems and the answers to them. In all of these cases, there's little or no evidence that they're effective. And there's essentially no evidence that they give children a boost that lasts or impacts their later learning and development, certainly not in any fundamental way. The presence of this large and profitable industry, however, demonstrates the strong desire that parents have to help their children develop faster, to give their children a leg up on the competition. This is a very natural desire. I don't mean to say it's an inherently bad thing, but it's a tendency that parents would be smart to keep under control, especially when there isn't any scientific data demonstrating that the products provide that leg up at all. What if there were evidence that you could teach a 9-month-old to read? What if one day, it could happen, someone discovers just the right set of flashcards, books, and, interactive touchscreen software? What if someone develops a system that does enable a 1-year-old to read or perform math at a 6-year-old level? What then? First, it's apparent that this person would become very wealthy. There's a big demand for products like that. This future technique we're imagining, whatever it is, will certainly involve a lot of time and energy, likely hundreds of hours, maybe thousands. If you could do something like that, if you could invest that time and achieve an amazing boost of your 1-year-old's math or reading ability, would it be a good idea for you to do it? The answer here, according to the research and thinking of a lot of different experts in this area, is no. If you spent thousands of hours drilling your child with flashcards and video presentations and interactive touchscreen software, you would be taking those thousands of hours away from other activities. We adults focus very heavily on achievement in things like math and reading, These are things that are taught and tested in school. But there's a great deal of learning that children accomplish every day that they're alive, even without a single flashcard or even a scientific-sounding DVD title. We don't usually call it learning or studying. Certainly our kids don't. They have a different word for it. They call it playing. In 1981, not all that long ago, surveys of parents indicated that children had about 40% of their day available for play. Not piano lessons or soccer practice here, just play. Make up a game in your room play. Dig a hole in the backyard for no reason play. Throw a frisbee around with the neighbor kids play. Unstructured playtime. By the late 90s, this time dropped down to about 25% of a child's time. The amount of free play among most children today is less than 10 hours per week. As late as the 1980s, essentially every elementary school had a recess period during the day. By around 2010, about 40% of schools had removed the recess from the schedule. There's a persistent belief among these school systems that unstructured time spent during recess can be better devoted to structured study. Rather than running around and playing, many school administrators feel that children should spend that half hour or so of recess time studying more important material, things that are relevant to achievement tests, things like reading, geography, history, and math. These tests are increasingly important, not just for how children are evaluated, but for how schools are evaluated. In some cases, even school funding by state and national sources is tied directly to the average scores produced on these achievement tests. And even after the child leaves school, the amount of playtime they're allowed is further reduced. My long list of tips wasn't just relevant for parents. Pursuing that long list of tips requires active participation on the part of the child as well. There are great benefits associated with team sports, music lessons, learning to read, and the like, but there's also research that suggests benefits from play, from allowing time for free, unstructured play. When children engage in play, when they engage in play that's structured by themselves, they're explorers. They try new things. Some of those things they won't like so much. They will, however, from time to time, discover new activities that they absolutely love doing. Play is where children explore the world, but also themselves. It's not surprising that several studies have linked the amount of time children have for free play to their level of happiness, to their self-esteem, and to their self-concept. Play is where that self-concept happens. Other studies have found links between free playtime and physical fitness. Children with relatively little time to play are more likely to be obese. Recall the tip about reducing sedentary activity time in order to make lasting changes to body mass index. This fits very well with the notion of the child as an explorer as well. If the child tries many things, she's more likely to find some active things that she enjoys doing. As she continues to pursue these things in the future, her weight will be more likely to remain within that healthy range. It can be a great thing for parents to play with their children. But note that one of the critical factors identified in studies like this, studies of the benefits of play, their play needs to be child-directed. So if you as a parent pick a particular game to play, or even if you just suggest a particular game to play, the child will typically acquiesce to your direction. If this happens, it short-circuits the entire exploration aspects of play. So if you do join your child during his or her window of time for free play, then be sure to let the child lead the dance while you do. Other studies have found links between the frequency of free play and creativity. It's often been observed that when young children play, they often make up new games with novel rules. This is most common in middle childhood, but it can be seen in many kids between about 5 and even 14 years of age. An established game, baseball, basketball, these games have set rules. They're written down in some book, and they're followed by all the people who play it. A new game, however, involves agreeing among the group of players to a set of new rules, then playing a little, and then usually refining and renegotiating those rules to make the game more fun. Many studies have noted that a group of children engaged in this type of novel gameplay spend more time negotiating the rules than actually playing. According to one study, about 80% of the total playtime in this kind of a situation is devoted to discussion of and negotiation about the rules. Given this attribute of free play, it's not surprising that many studies have identified links between free play time and creativity. It's also sensible that social skills would be seen to increase as a child has more time to engage in child-structured activities that aren't dictated by adults. What can parents do to encourage children to engage in free play activities? I've already hinted at two of the tips here. The first is simply to make time for it. As you find yourself scheduling times for tennis lessons, swim team, piano practice, homework, make sure not to fill up the whole schedule. Many parents seek to maximize the use children make of their limited and very valuable time. The parents achieve this by filling up as much of the schedule as they can with enrichment activities, many of which I've actually suggested in this course. Those enrichment activities are great. I don't want to take that back. But giving the child a block of time, several days per week, to go out and engage in free play is also a very enriching activity. The second play-related tip that I've already mentioned was about letting the child lead the activities if you yourself choose to join in the free play with your child. Something you might notice, something that's common for you to encounter when you first release your children to engage in free play, is that they won't know how. That is, if a child has been engaged in adult-structured activities for many weeks or months, for pretty much all the time, getting going with being the person in charge of what activity to try next may feel very new. Even if the child doesn't come up with something for several minutes, my tip here is that you wait. You could make general suggestions, perhaps, maybe something like, why don't you head outside for a while? But you should resist the urge to make specific suggestions, suggestions that could take away the creative and exploratory aspects of this free play activity. Your child is even somewhat likely to complain that he or she is bored at some point. But that boredom will eventually pass, and it will be replaced with some activity that the child will choose. It's been noted by several people that boredom often precedes large bursts of creativity, and that's just what we want here. My final tip today is that you try to let your child engage in free play, not just at home, but when learning at school. Many parents have a lot of options for where to send their children to school. There are many different types of preschools and elementary schools out there. Historically, children have just attended whatever school was closest to their homes. But that's been changing. Large school districts, for instance, school districts in large cities, have increasingly been allowing parents to choose where their child will go to school. There are many motivations for this. It makes schools more diverse, provides motivation for parents and community leaders to make all of the schools better, not just those located in particular affluent neighborhoods. When school funding is tied to the number of students who enroll, it also incentivizes becoming the best school possible. This shift to school choice has also created an interesting situation that didn't used to occur until children started considering where to go to college. Parents and children visit schools and think about how they want to learn. What type of learning environment should a child choose? Some elementary schools, very relevant to this lecture, have emphasized free choice and play as an important element of learning. These schools schedule time each day for play, for recess for sure. And even when the children are in class, they're allowed to work on things that they choose. Maybe not at all times, but for a significant chunk of the day. The Montessori model that we discussed is a good example of this type of school, but it's certainly not the only one. Often, these less structured schools don't fare well when parents come to visit and consider them for their children. The parents see a classroom filled with kids who are playing. That's not what most parents are looking for. They want to see a classroom filled with kids who are studying, kids who are working, kids who are learning. The research I've described today suggests that kids who are playing are learning. Indeed, they're learning things that can't be mastered while sitting quietly following the moment-to-moment instructions of an adult teacher. Education is often driven by increasingly long to-do lists, lists of things that we want children to know and lists of skills that we want children to have in place by particular ages. These lists are long, such that the school day isn't long enough to get all of them in. Part of the job of teachers and school administrators is to make choices about what things to put at the top of those lists and which things to leave off. If children spend a significant amount of time playing, then the list will need to be shorter. Play is a nice, good thing, no one would argue otherwise, but shortening the list of things kids will learn so that they can play, that's not something many adults are willing to do. Every kid plays in a different way. Some kids will play at math-related activities or reading. Many will not. Some will play at games that teach and promote social reasoning or physical coordination or artistic and spatial creativity. Many parents and teachers just aren't comfortable with leaving those learning choices up to the child. The research in this area, however, suggests that we should try to trust these kids more. We learn best when we're pursuing answers to our own questions and when we're seeking knowledge and skills to achieve our own goals. That's true for all humans, but it's especially true for children. If we choose our children's activities for them and then closely supervise and control them, the children will learn more of what we want them to learn, but less overall. The science doesn't provide a clear method for balancing this trade-off. At one end of the spectrum, we have more control, but less overall learning. At the other end of the spectrum, we have less control, but more overall learning. Every parent and teacher has to pick some balance between these two extremes. When it comes to my own children, I try to lean in the direction of more overall learning, but probably like you, there are certain things that I want my kids to definitely study. We want our kids to be very good at reading, writing, and arithmetic, along with geography, chemistry, physics, history, and actually a fairly long list of subjects. If our kids don't choose to work on one or several of those, then we'll probably push them to do so anyway. Like many parents, including me, you probably believe that skills and knowledge in these standard areas will lead to more success in the future. That said, while we want children to succeed in life, it's worth noting that we can't really know exactly how they will define their own success. An important part of their individual journey, of their own unique childhood, a part that I strive to let them have, is the freedom to figure that out. Thank you for joining me for this course on raising kids who thrive. I hope you found this research on parenting as fascinating as I do. I hope that you won't see this course as an end, but as a beginning. I've described a lot of evidence-based tips for parents and children, but I've also endeavored to help you think better about how to evaluate other ideas and findings that you'll encounter yourself. Head to the library, get online. There's a wealth of information out there for you to explore. I'm always curious to hear good stories and ideas about child development and parenting as well. If you have questions or even just stories, you should feel free to contact me, either by letter or email. I'll hope to hear from you. Raising children, taking that journey of discovery and life with them, is one of the biggest and best things that one can do. It can be challenging, exciting, wonderful, and terrifying, sometimes all of those things at the same time. The scientific approach to parenting decisions, the approach I've presented in this course, can help with some of the challenging parts. But thankfully, I think, it can't and won't diminish the rich and powerful experiences of being a family. Now turn this off and go play with your kids. Goodbye.